Good morning, everybody.
Should be okay.
The thing is, when you step in as a panel or a speaker right after somebody like Nick, it's always a huge set of expectations. So we'll try and make sure we at least live up to it. And of course, we have Hamdan, who works for Nick. So I hope he has few traits borrowed from Nick. That being said, good morning. This panel is about AI and blockchain in smart city. So the idea is, if I am AI and the other person is blockchain, how do we tango in a smart city? And I have a very interesting set of panelists here, but before I get to them, I would like to get a sense of the audience here itself. Like, how many of you work for the governments or are dealing with governments or servicing governments here? Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, right. And people who are part of the ecosystem for the smart city, like either as a hardware provider or software provider or something. Okay, and the rest, I believe, are here to sort of learn about the technology. Okay. I would probably start with Ryan Merheby. He is 15 years old, student, and he has a startup. So a young entrepreneur in the field of AI, and he's been working in the health tech space, moved by social impact. That's how he started this enterprise, and the enterprise has been there for a while now. Next to him on the other side is the senior most panelist, Dr. Yannis, about 30 plus odd years of experience, has a PhD in AI from the University of Edinburgh, and he's a blockchain consultant plus AI consultant for the last at least 5 years in the blockchain space. And then the lovely lady here, Fadwa Mohanna, she is doing a very incredible project, micity, and micity is primarily a smart device. When you walk close to it and you authenticate yourself, I'll leave the details for Fadwa to share eventually, but it's a very beautiful device, and I really encourage all of you, if you get a chance, to actually look at the video of our product. And then I have Hamdan Azhar, who I mentioned works at Zap.org with Nick, but he's also been doing a lot of interesting stuff in his previous life. He has been a data scientist at Facebook, based out of New York. But he has a very interesting project called Prismoji. And Prismoji is about trying to gauge the impact of emojis in different cultures. So different cultures interpret emojis very differently. So definitely not really into the concept what we're going to talk about today, but very interesting project again. So that being said, I would like to start with you, Fadwa, and try to sort of understand. The idea today is blockchain and AI in smart city. So for the benefit of the audience, can you just share with them, like, what exactly is your idea of a smart city? Because a smart city has different scope, different meaning for a lot of different people. So let us understand that first.
Sure. First of all, good morning, everybody. I'm extremely thrilled to be here. A smart city is it's a city which, I mean, if I go with a lame definition, a smart city really is a city that employs ICT, information and communication technologies, to constantly judge the city. So it uses tools and technologies to get better, to start a conversation between a government and a citizen. So the word smart city, by definition, happens in a context of an urban context where there is a government / municipality, and on the other hand there is a user / citizen, and there is a conversation happening between those two entities. Now this conversation used to be one directional. It was one way. So a government builds a two-way highway, does a water pipe installation, some electricity installation, some utility, some service, sewerage pipe, and the diameters were based on assumption. The whole dimensioning of the power stations were based on assumptions. All of these was one-way conversation. So that was what we used to do. And then the idea came that the city is a two-way process. The government is talking to the citizens by dimensioning roads and utilities and pipes and everything, and the citizen is sending back some kind of feedback. And this feedback, whether it is a sensor in a form of an IoT device or whether it's really a conversation happening, but there is a kind of a feedback whether the initial assumptions were true or not. So a smart city is constantly getting better by listening to the two-way conversation happening, by refining the utilities and the services that the government is supplying, by listening to the citizens. On the other hand, the citizen has the moral obligation to send feedback as well to the government. So a smart city is in a constant process of learning and getting better by using all the available technologies. Today we're talking about AI and blockchain in the context of a smart city. Now, if this conference was happening 5 years ago, we would have all been talking about IoT. That was the craze, if you want, 5 years ago. It was all those sensors and readings and devices. Now, ICT, as I told you, ICT is evolving. It was IoT. Today, the tool for a smart city is AI and blockchain. We're still at a very early stage. We're still experimenting with all of those, but the city is having more tools today. So AI is giving amazing feedback on how to get our living and our experiences much more efficient, much more cost conscious, and much more delivered in a much more pleasant way to the citizen. And blockchain has a lot of, it will add a lot of integrity, a lot of a source of trust, source of truth for the city that also can be added. So, and if we have this conference 5 years from today, I'm sure we're going to talk about another technology in the context of a smart city. So, smart city is always learning, the tools will change, and today we're going to just talk about how AI and blockchain are adding to this conversation. I hope I answered that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, you did. Hamdan, if I can ask you to pick up from where Fadwa just left and actually talk about the aspects of data, because data is critical in all these different functions, and for making the smart city work. So can you talk a bit about the role of data, what sorts of data are there, how these data, sort of aggregated, how do they function in a smart city?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I think, thank you for having me here. This is an incredibly distinguished panel. I'm sorry, our flight was delayed for like 20 hours, so I didn't have a chance to read the briefing materials, but I think these guys have a lot of, Anurag did a lot of preparation, but we were supposed to fly to Azerbaijan, and we were going to take Azerbaijan Airlines from New York to Baku, and then the plane broke down. They couldn't start it. So they had all these headlines about how they leased a brand new 787, but the mechanics couldn't start the plane. So we were stuck there for 20 hours, and then finally we just came straight to Dubai. So I'm still a little jet lagged, but I apologize for that. I think I was really motivated by what Usman Sultan spoke about yesterday. I think many of you were here for his talk. When he talked about the framework we should adopt when we're considering new technology and new innovation, and he said that technology can only answer the first question, is it possible? And then economics answers the question, is it feasible? And then society has to answer the question, is it desirable? And I think this is why talking about ethics and morality and asking ourselves what kind of a society do we want to create is very important. I think especially when it comes to data, where there's a lot of concerns about privacy, a lot of concerns about to what extent can these technologies be used to curb our freedom as opposed to improve and enhance our lives. Because I think it's I think at least in Silicon Valley, it seems that we've gone too far to the extreme of focusing only on the technology and not asking about the societal and ethical implications of, yesterday I was playing with my cousin's daughter, and who I came to visit for the first time, and 2-year-old, 3-year-old girl, and she just plays on the iPad all day. And I think Usman Sultan also talked about the iPad. And then she watches on Netflix, she watches these Russian cartoons. She doesn't speak Russian, but it's called Masha. It's like a Russian cartoon. She just watches it all day. And technology is really changing our lives tremendously. And especially when it comes to data. Because we have to ask ourselves, when we have a smart city that's always listening to us, that's always watching us, is this always a good idea? I was in Singapore recently. Has anyone been to Singapore? So in Singapore, I was on a juice diet, so I was only drinking green juice. And then we went on the metro, on the subway. And as soon as I try to walk on the subway with my green juice, an old woman comes to me, and she's wearing hijab. There are a lot of Muslims in Singapore, so I thought she wanted to say salam, or say it was nice to see me. She said, "You cannot drink the juice on the metro. You cannot drink the juice on the metro." And I said, "It's okay, I'll finish it here." She said, "No, you cannot even have it in this building. I will lose my job. You can't have a juice in the building." And I said, "Auntie, I have not eaten or drank all day because I'm on a juice diet. I have to drink juice." She said, no, just throw it out, throw it out." And then I was like, wow. So in Singapore, it's supposed to be a smart city, but now if you imagine a smart city where sensors are constantly monitoring who's drinking juice in the subway, and then they immediately fine you and they debit your bank account every time they see you drinking juice, then it would not be a good. I don't think it would be good. Yeah. I like to speed a lot when I drive, and right now in the U.S. at least, in the old days it was determined on if the police would catch you. But now if you have a sensor determining every time you speed, we went to Switzerland, I think we got $8,000 of fines, and Nick was driving. $8,000 of fines in 20 minutes, because he would keep speeding and it would flash, keep speeding and it would flash. And I still haven't paid those, but don't tell Switzerland. But I think this is just my suggestion when we talk about this as technologists, that we really have to keep the societal implications in mind and engage broader society in this dialogue. Because I think our role as technologists is not simply, is it possible? It's just trigger the conversation of, is it desirable? What are the consequences? What are the implications? We cannot leave those questions just to the ethicists or just to the government or just to folks who don't know technology. The folks who know technology best are the ones who should be having and be part of those conversations. I don't know if I answered your question at all, but hopefully this was helpful.
I think it was helpful for the audience for sure, and I think it hit a very relevant point, especially about bringing the human aspects into it, and that is something we definitely keep forgetting every time. And I would actually ask Dr. Yannis to sort of comment on this. I mean, of course, AI has its own limitations. Data has their own challenges in terms of modeling it. You can only model it to a certain extent. Where the implications of ethics and what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, I think those things are still in flux. They're still not 100%, I would say, finessed to the extent that you could actually implement those models. So from that perspective, how does blockchain sort of help AI? Like blockchain can help with the data sets. How can it help with the data? Like, what are your thoughts on the intersection?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And thank you, Anurag, and thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in this beautiful city. So, yes, AI has been around for a long time. It was a human would be retired by now. Of course, the modern AI or modern incarnations of AI have attracted all the attention for the past maybe 5 to 10 years because of all the breakthroughs we have seen. And the field has been overhyped, which is nothing new. I've been in AI for a long time, that I have been. AI has been through many hype cycles before, so that's pretty much normal business there. However, one of the things that become very apparent with AI systems as they are applied in large is that there is a couple of issues. One is the predominant techniques in AI these days is machine learning and in particular neural networks. So for those of you not really following this field, it is some kind of a mathematical inspiration of the biological neurons, not necessarily an actual implementation, but the mathematical inspiration of how they can be applied. However, as they become more and more complex, in other words, as you have thousands and even millions of neurons firing in this mathematical model, you really don't know what's going on and why a particular decision has been made. It's not as if the decision is wrong, the decision is right, which is fantastic. You build a system that works, but you don't really know how it reached a decision. In other words, what we typically call the reasoning. So in the past maybe 2-3 years, there has been a very large push, not only from regulators, also from society, towards a new strand of AI, which is called, it's dubbed XAI or explainable AI. essentially having a system which will be able to explain the decision, why you reach a particular decision. And just to give you an idea, that has many implications. So for instance, you might have the right to recourse. So if somebody is refused credit or refused medical treatment, or a particular decision has been made, you need to know what were the basis for this decision. In a lot of large-scale AI systems out there, this is more or less a black box, or at least it was up to recently, because the field is really moving rapidly. As I said, it's really booming. Google just announced recently they have something they call it the correlated activators, which basically allows you to build a kind of a heat map and understand what the AI system is looking at when it's trying to classify an image, which kind of works in certain restricted scenarios. Now, looking into the blockchain and how it can alleviate the situation there is that traditionally AI and blockchain don't necessarily go together. And that is because I'm kind of like a privilege, and I've been going to events in both sides because I have experience in both sides. And it's only in events like this, basically blockchain events, that you get to talk about AI. If you go to AI events, well, there is no blockchain talk there. It's as simple as that. It's not as if AI people are not interested in. I think the agendas are really full with other things. But there is some very interesting trailblazing projects out there, from the Neurochain, the Ocean Wall, the Deep Brain. I can elaborate on that one, maybe off topic or on the panel, that identified a few interesting areas. And one of the things that current AI is kind of, let's say it's a kind of a weak point with the black box, it's the explainability. And the blockchain system essentially is a chain of custody and a chain of events, which means that if you take the principles of blockchain systems, especially the ones which the ledger is truly immutable, because there are ledgers which can be not immutable for certain reasons, then you can actually record every decision ever made by an AI system. Having this kind of record which is immutable and cannot be tampered with can provide a kind of a comfort to the regulators or those who are going to be auditing the system, that they can trace back the decisions as they were made. A much more impactful area of blockchain in AI is with regards to data. So modern AI, it's very data hungry. It's not as if many data, of course, the more the better, but it's good quality data. What you can do with blockchain systems, you can actually vet the auditing of this data. At the moment, these very large AI systems that they need to consume mass amount of data, it's pretty much a game for the big, right? So large tech conglomerates, which they have the capacity to conglomerate and bring together zettabytes of data to train their systems. And of course, then they open up to the world and they offer them on open source systems. What you can do with a decentralized system like blockchains, you can actually decentralize the collection of data. So the data themselves, they actually live and verified, vetted on the blockchains, and then fed it into the AI system. Therefore, you know that there is good quality data, but data which is also auditable and go back to the source, so they know where they're coming from. So these two areas are the most impactful ones, and already some trailblazing projects are exploring them. And there's a third area, if I'm allowed to go to, which I think it's pretty much the pinnacle of what blockchain technology can try to achieve, which is in the area of smart contracts, or smart. So smart contracts in a technical sense, currently they are neither smart nor contracts, right? I have a background also in law, so they're nothing to do with the legal contract, and definitely they're not smart. Essentially, they're just pure procedurals, if A, then B, else C, which there's not much reasoning or inference there. But AI is really good in doing exactly that, getting patterns of previous data and infer something new. So AI can actually help blockchain there and bring together this kind of more smart ecosystems of contracts which could be automatically deployed, and in a in a smart city environment, for example, provide you from a systems of record, as is the current city environment, to the systems of insights, generate insight of what is the best action to take, provided we have an incident, for example, and we need to arrange an incident response. So that's my view on how these things can be combined.
So primarily, blockchain helps AI explain itself. I mean, that is the biggest challenge we all know with AI today. You ask Siri something, and sometimes she comes up with funny, notions, and you don't really know how she arrived at that particular, suggestion. And with blockchain, you could actually pinpoint how that decision was made, and therefore you can probably train Siri. Again, we are looking futuristically at this point. Ryan, I would like to now, come to you. I think you bring a very different perspective to this panel. I mean, very young age, you've done a lot of good things at this age, and you are working on the social impact side. And of course, it's critical. I mean, Hamdan made a point about humans being at the center, and I think that talks quite a lot in terms of what you think about, passionately about AI. And I think we had these conversations offline as well, where you are so passionate about, bringing the human aspect, empowering people. So can you talk a bit more about that?
So essentially, today people can vote and they can choose they can make decisions on smart contracts and come to an agreement. And AI is expected to surpass human intelligence in like a decade. So that brings up the question of how we implement these to improve the technology in a smart city. And I see the need for the intertwining of these two technologies to improve society and the lives of the citizens, akin to the phone and the camera, perhaps in the form of decentralized AI, or like Dr. Yannis said, the blockchain could act as a vat for data to feed into the AI so that it can make decisions. And as of now, most data is controlled by a small group of people that obviously run the AI and have the most nodes on the blockchain. So instead of having all this data collected by AI, held up and not shared, I would say intertwining the technologies will allow for a free flow of information to citizens and people in the society's ecosystem. And we also have to, in a sense, find the morality of AI. And how do we define this morality? Well, obviously, all the new technologies in the past have led to wars and conflict. Like new technologies, typically, for example, nuclear and chemical inventions. And if we want to strive away from that outcome, we need to early on, while this technology is new, seed that morality into AI to serve the greater good, and instead of a small group of people who control it and may want to turn it into a weapon for their own financial benefit. And yeah, that's essentially where I see there's a need for intertwining the two in a smart city to bring a positive impact for society.
I mean, that's a relevant, a very, very important point as well. And I don't know if you have time to, sort of get into the details, because this conversation can go on for an hour, do you think there's a framework which we can apply today when we have to look at the ethics and also making sure the data is accessible to everybody, but at the same time not centralized? So do you think there's a framework, or do you see a framework coming up in future? Maybe a quick 1 or 2 minutes answer to that.
So a framework to build morality?
Yes. Building morality into the systems that we are trying to build for future, because different conversation. I mean, you go online and type CEO on Google, and excuse me, but you'll find white males over there. I mean, only white old males are not CEO. We have a CEO right here, right? She's a female. So that is the problem with our AI systems today, right? So how do we put morality into the center of all these things when we are designing? Is there a framework? That's my question, I guess.
Obviously, decentralizing AI would be a huge thing, because it opens AI to the public, obviously, and it allows everyone to steer the evolution of AI, instead of just one company or group of people who control the AI to decide everything for their own benefit. And for framework, I believe the first person, when they created a robot, there were a set of 3 rules, which was don't hurt humans, don't hurt yourself, and follow your orders. But it becomes way more complex when you have the idea of an AI, because someone who would tell an AI to, for example, do something that it would harm other humans, but they also have the rule of following instructions. So that's, in a sense, where I think the blockchain is a huge framework, like in itself, to build a morality, because when you give the greater public a decision on how AI evolves, instead of having, one mind and one, group of people who decide what happens to the AI. I don't know of any other frameworks, but I believe the blockchain is very essential in creating that safe framework in the smart city.
Right. Okay.
If I may quickly, Anurag, jump on this one. With regards to frameworks for morality and ethics in AI, there's been a lot of intense debate recently in many decision-making centers. Somehow Europe seems to be taking the lead in ethics and data protection, see GDPR, which is good. And there has been also a very large social scale experiment, the MIT moral machine. If you just Google it, you will see it. It's kind of this hypothetical scenario of what happens if a self-driving car faces certain situations and need to make life or death decisions. Right. Although these are kind of interesting initiatives, I don't think there will be one framework to rule them all. So in that sense, what Ryan is saying, it's actually interesting observation that you need to have this kind of a self-organizing system that by itself, the dynamics make sure that the morality of the time will always prevail, which is essentially what the permissionless, the totally censor-free blockchain can do, because it's in the good of the society, it's the good of the system to maintain the transactions and the transparency of the transactions in the chain. In a similar way, you can have a tokenized or decentralized AI, which in the best interest of the society to maintain certain levels of morality.
Right. So I think let's shift gears. We've talked so far about the fact that a blockchain can help explain AI. It can also make AI models more efficient by having less data consumption. Let's touch upon the fact of security, network security, device security, data security. That's a big aspect, right? So how does the intersection of AI and blockchain, in these smart city context help with security? Fadwa, you'd like to take that question?
Yeah, sure. So, thank you for asking the question. It is spot on. The premise today is that you have to make a choice. You either have to decide that you want to be very private, so your data is private, nobody has it, but you will suffer from an inconvenience of services, because every time you have to go to a certain party, open a bank account, you want to buy a ticket, you have to start from scratch. So every transaction you go, you have to start from zero, because your data is only with you. On the other hand, the premise is if you want very convenient services, that you will be, as soon as you log on, you're recognized, your profile is linked to your social media, fed from, Google, LinkedIn, all your social media, and then the minute you open the website, I can suggest like a blue shirt for you, because I know exactly what you've been doing on the internet, you're looking for a blue shirt. Today is that give up as much as you can about yourself so that I give you a convenient service, or give nothing and get a very clumsy service. So today, the premise is like this. It's privacy on one side, convenience of services on the other side. And there is always a trade-off. So just imagine like a knob in the middle. So if you want to moving it to the right and to the left, is you want more convenience, give up privacy. You want less convenience, you have more privacy. This is how the world is. Everything you read, everything you see, there is this premise that it is a trade-off between convenience and privacy. So GDPR, for example, Dr. Yannis just mentioned it. GDPR took a very, very clear position that EU is all about privacy first, and then everything else. So the right of the citizen, the right to be forgotten, the right to own your data, to know who uses it, for what purpose. So all of these now is happening in Europe, and you see privacy is taking central stage. If you look at Asia, on the other side, what's happening in China, India, you see that the word privacy doesn't even exist in China. What are you talking about? So all the data is owned by the government, everything is is public ownership, and all the data is with DD and all those services that, that control your, basically all the services that you have throughout the day. And then you have the Americas, on the other hand, that are still, they didn't take a position. There is no GDPR equivalent law today in the North America, but it's coming by states. So for example, California now has very, very similar laws to GDPR, but only the state of California. Then there is another state, for example, Iowa, they have a very clear biometrics law, etc. So you can see it coming by state, and you can see it coming in very fragmented way, but you can see at least the direction where America is going. But will it reach a GDPR level? We don't know yet. It's a big debate given all what's happening today in the US. But the question you just asked, privacy and ownership of your data in the context of a smart city and access to services. And it seems all of us every night make up the decision, like, my data is mine, I don't want anybody to know where I live, I don't know anybody to know my telephone number, and the minute I tell you, like, log on to get a free paper about something, you're willing to enter 10 things, your email, your telephone, your work address, anything. In 5 seconds, if I tell you, you will get a paper for free, or you will get a free weekly something, and then all of you log on with your Facebook, you log on with your LinkedIn, which is what we call the federated sign-on, and then you give up your privacy in 3 seconds without noticing to access a certain service. So I don't think this is clear-cut today. The premise of how it is presented to us, it's like it's a trade-off. The reality, and this is our position, the reality, no, it doesn't have to be a trade-off. You don't have to give up your privacy to get a convenient service. This is all the work we're doing, is that your data is always your data, and that's why we use blockchain and we use these technologies, is that your data is only owned by you. You release it whenever you want. You are the ultimate owner. You know who is consuming it, for what purpose, for how long. You can revoke that access, and on the other side, you're still entitled to a convenient service. So we want to change that conversation. You do not need to choose between privacy and convenience. You can have both. So that's at least our framework. This is the ethos by which we work. You can have both, and there is no trade-off. And that's what we would like to, to show you later on.
If I may, I think Fadwa has hit on a critical issue, which is that we talk about blockchain and AI as if these are, two technologies, and it's like, how do different technologies work together, and how does my cell phone work with my temperature gauge at my house, and maybe we can sync up these two technologies. But the reality is that the underlying ethos of these technologies is very different. Blockchain, when it began as the Bitcoin blockchain, and a lot of people think Bitcoin is a bad word, but the reality is there was no blockchain before Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was peer-to-peer, it was decentralized, it was permissionless, and that's the ethos underlying blockchain. If you look at AI, you find that AI, as the panelists have mentioned, is focused on data, and the vast majority of the data in the world right now is controlled by 4 or 5 companies. So there's a tremendous disconnect. There's a chasm where you have AI and data on the one hand, which is conglomerated in these 4 or 5 companies that are within a 20-mile radius in a certain zip code in California. And then you have the blockchain, which began as a network of millions of people all around the world who are able to transact with each other conveniently, privately, somewhat privately, pseudonymously, in a way that didn't need a big company to intermediate their actions. And I think that's the fundamental chasm between the two technologies. And then when we talk about smart cities, I think we have to talk about what are the principles we want to create in a smart city. The principles are, you would say, privacy, you would say transparency, you would say accountability, efficiency. And all of these principles are in tension with each other. It's not like you can have a smart city that's completely private, completely efficient, and transparent, and accountable accountable, which is not going to happen. But smart cities aren't created in a vacuum. They're created by human beings. They're created by technologists such as ourselves. And I think we have to figure out a way to empower ordinary people using blockchain. And if we take this idea that currently AI is centralized in these large companies, and blockchain historically has empowered ordinary people, it has taken power away from banks and Western Union. Like, I gave my little sister an allowance the other day, even though she's in college. My mom still makes me give her an allowance. And I sent her to a bread wallet, to her Bitcoin in Boston, and she got it within like 30 seconds. I didn't have to go to find a Western Union in Jumeirah village, or I have to go to some Western Union. I didn't have to do that. It was convenient. It was effective. And I think fundamentally blockchain, since it has proven itself as being able to empower people in decentralized authority, needs to regulate AI. I think that's where we're going forward. I think a lot of the work we're doing at Zap.org is to create a platform where ordinary people can transact with each other using their data in a way that's private, in a way that's secure, so that you can have a soybean farmer in Kenya who can upload data on his crop yield to a decentralized platform, and you can have a 14-year-old high school student in Chicago trading futures off of that. Which is incredible, because previously two humans who wanted to engage in a complex transaction needed a company. Previously, two humans who wanted to, even if I want to share a picture so that all 30 of my aunties and uncles can see it, I have to go to a platform. I have to go to WhatsApp, or I have to go to Facebook, I have to go to Google Photos, I have to go to Flickr. You have to ask yourself, what is the common theme among these options, among these convenient options? They're all big centralized companies. I need a company to transact with another human being. And blockchain forces us to ask the question, is that a rule of the world? Does it always have to be the case that if I as a human want to engage with another human, it has to go through a big company? Even if I want to text this gentleman over here, does it have to go through Dubai Telecom, or does it have to go through WhatsApp? Or is there a way human beings can transact with each other on their own terms? And I think that's what blockchain allows us to do. Historically, AI has not been something that's been done on our own terms. It's been done on the terms of Facebook and Google and Amazon and Apple. And I think this is the promise of blockchain. And I think this is an underlying question that we have to tackle, is how can we use these technologies to free ourselves and to create a society that is to our liking and not to the liking of the profit margins of 3 or 4 big companies.
Right, yeah, that's essentially what it is. I mean, it helps to, are we done? So I think we'll try to summarize and maybe open up for one question or 2 questions. So it helps democratize and takes power away from these big corporations, the big 4 that Hamdan just mentioned. You know, it gives power back to people. That's one of the key criteria. And of course, it breaks down the data silos, like all these big data silos. Within the smart city, there are so many different agencies which have their own different data centers. It helps you talk to each other, and the way it does is, of course, by employing a layer of security on top of the different devices, which otherwise oftentimes have a critical hack factor wherein you could get into the system. So I think we could go on this for a while. I mean, but you know, the panelists are going to be there, for you to ask questions after we are done. But maybe if there are 1 or 2 pressing questions that you want to sort of ask, please stand up, tell your name, and ask your question. All right, there. Maybe she's bringing the mic.
Creating blockchain and AI. I mean, have you seen examples of these 2 different technologies intertwined and made applicable? I know we've talked about the smart city context, but I'm just keen to understand, because I'm an advocate of technology, especially at my firm, and I want to see some real life examples and see whether I can take that away and expand on that.
Yeah,
so
if I may take on that. Yeah, so There is, as I mentioned earlier, a few trailblazing projects. I call them projects. It's essentially startup companies with quite a few millions of dollars raised already, all of them in between. I just name a few of them, and we can have an off-panel chat. So Ocean Protocol, Neurochain, DeepBrain, SingularityNet, Agrelo. They're just some of the top out there, especially from the blockchain world. You'll be hard-pressed to find startups from the AI space, which will lead into that because of what I explained earlier. Things need to evolve a little bit. However, in all of these projects I mentioned, they are very credible in the space. So, for instance, Ocean Protocol are the people behind the IPFS. For those of you, just an acronym, it's basically the interplanetary file system, which has been used by so many startups out there. SingularityNet, obviously the Sophia robot, you probably have seen it in the media, because Hansa Robotics are behind them. DeepBrain, Neurochain, actually is a fantastic project. They use a lot of smart agents and AI tech, but is way too ahead of its time. A bunch of smart guys based in Paris. But there is a few projects out there. Now, what you really need to understand is that this synergy between AI and blockchain is just starting. So it's kind of early days to pinpoint to something which is going to be the big winner. And I think the field is going to grow up in the years to come. With regards to the smart cities context, there are so many applications of AI in smart cities and so many applications of AI in blockchain, but not things combined to do things at the same time. At least not at the scale that you can have maybe a global impact yet.
I'd like to add that my startup project, Dhonor, doesn't intertwine technologies, but uses them both to carry out one function. We run a smart organ wait list for matching based on DNA analysis on the AI, and we make these transactions on the blockchain. And we also host verification for patients, and basically their needs, if they're recurring, and they will be analyzed by AI, and then if there were to be any transactions, they'd be carried out on the blockchain.
Right. So I would like to thank my panelists, first of all, for sharing their insights. I learned a lot of things. Thank you so much. I'm sure it was helpful for my audience as well. Feel free to ask questions after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.